just like to note some observations from the last couple of weeks. There was mention in the last episode of difficulties with sleep. And I was looking at this morning, the effects of lack of sleep and the long-term effects it's having. And I also threw in there the depression or mental health. And I was trying to answer the question of why do I feel this way? Or more accurately, how is this contributing to my awareness or my lack of awareness? It seems as if my focus was on these issues of sleep or mental health and other things as well, but it all came down to, like rivers going to an ocean, it came back to awareness and the effects, or so-called effects, it was having on my awareness. So as these things were going on, the dealing with mental health, the night after night of difficult sleep, each night could have its own story of, well, I wake up at this time and this happened. One's mind can probably write a book on this, the complaints, the narration. But all of that can be dropped. So there was a noticing of the lack of awareness. Now, there must have been some awareness there, because I wouldn't have been aware of the lack of awareness. Thought was telling me that there is no awareness here, you are. All of that spiritual practice, it's not working. And that's how it felt like as well. There was, in this moment, it's almost as if there's a block of ice in my head. And it's difficult to feel. It's difficult to acknowledge feeling, whether it's feeling good or feeling perhaps good and bad are not the most accurate words I could use, but on the spectrum of feeling, some feelings are pleasant, some feelings are unpleasant. There seems to be something frozen here, a numbness almost. which is why I referred to it as a block of ice. So on one level there's almost a seeking for answers. Why am I not able to fully feel as if I'm being present, or why are my feelings numb in this moment? And on another level there is acceptance of this as well. With acceptance, you can always take a step back. You can always almost accept the unacceptable. And you can say the same of awareness as well in this way. You may say, okay, I don't feel awareness here. Okay. Perhaps there's awareness of not feeling awareness. I also went into body sensation as well. I was sitting last night with the windows open, enjoying the cool breeze, allowing it to try and lower my body temperature. And I was listening to some frequency music. For those who have not come across frequency music, there's music recorded at various frequencies that can affect the body in certain ways. So one of the frequencies I was listening to was 174. I don't know if it's the metric units are kilohertz or that's all over my head, but 174, from what I've seen in the video titles, that's as much as my knowledge goes with that, is to deal with physical pain, emotional pain. And I listened for about 40 minutes and I could feel the pain or the numbness in my head receding, space opening up. And this probably informed this morning of the why there is the numbness, or why there is the lack of presence. So in some ways it almost feels like I'm not living, which may be a strange thing to say. So there is something covering or interrupting. Perhaps the best way to say it, maybe stick to the covering the awareness, or it's given the perception that it's being covered with the difficulties of mind, the conditions of mind in this moment, where the mind is in pain, the mind is numb, the lack. So almost like a turbine, it's churning in this painful way. And I thought about the example of being in a nightclub where the music is so loud, constantly, where you're questioning if your hearing would be would be okay once you leave. So it's almost pulsating in your ears, and then someone comes up to you and saying, can you be in a state of blissful presence in this moment? And you can see the dilemma there of there's something blaring. So that's currently my situation, or my place in this moment. And in some ways it doesn't matter at all, because we are all in our own conditions in this moment. Whether you are blissfully in presence, whether you are in suffering, or in a situation such as this where there's a bit of confusion, or there is some sort of struggle, or muddied waters. You're not too sure what's happening. In all of these, it's just another ripple of water in the river of awareness. Of course, in this human form, we have the instruments that will react to this. The body may react, the mind may react with thoughts, maybe feelings, but it's all in the unchanging. Even in what can seem like confusion, or on one level the numbness, it is unpleasant, or the perception that there's a lack of awareness, that I'm not able to access the stillness of now, that the heavy mind is churning. It's almost squirming constantly. It's an uncomfortableness, and whether that's to do with the lack of sleep for a long period of time, where it's affected the mind in this way, and mixing in other elements or ingredients, mental health. This is what is in this moment. And it can always be accepted. Again, not accepting the condition, but accepting what is in the present moment. So in this one moment, I can accept there is pain, mental and physical pain. And I can accept the lack of space, the perception where there is a lack of space due to this pain. Due to this uncomfortableness, unpleasantness. certain things can almost give me a little boost of awareness, a small glimmer, as if the clouds part for a brief moment. I remembered yesterday after showering and I was getting dressed, I was so unaware of what I was doing that I put one leg through my underwear and I almost lost balance. You can picture it, me trying to stay on my feet as I and in that moment I immediately slowed down. I was aware that perhaps in the slowness it would allow almost the environment for awareness to arise. It almost supports that more, in not as a rule, but just the sense in that moment was to slow down. So ever so slowly, with all due care and attention, I was putting one leg through and the other, reaching, feeling the movement of the arm as it grabbed the t-shirt down, and feeling the materials my arm glided through, and then the other. And this didn't last for too long. I think after I'd gotten changed, the slowness had drifted away. Maybe thought had covered up that intention, and I was gone again. Yeah, this feels as if this is just one of the elements that will come up in this practice, the condition of the mind. My own understanding is if the mind is in distress or uncomfortableness, such as the situation I described as mine, then it's almost as if it's like a heavy weight that you're going to be walking around with. And this may contribute to the covering up of awareness, depending on your maturity, depending on your path, your conditions. But there's a possibility that this could be a contribution towards that. We've spoken about this before, about almost taking care of mind, taking care of body. So you're almost creating a more suitable environment for awareness. But saying that, the unpleasantness or challenges of body and mind, they can almost be jewels for awareness as well, where you go through them, you go deeper, they push you deeper, and that brings you into awareness. So there is no regimented path here. The path of satisfying mind or body so awareness can come through. Or it's not a case of where you have to suffer. It's knowing in the present moment what will help. In my situation, it feels as if there was a way to appease the mind or to remedy the mind, might be a better way to put it, with adequate sleep, then there'll be some alignment into the present moment, or the heaviness will dissipate and allow for the lightness to arise more easily for me. But this is just simply the situation for me in this moment. For others, it could possibly be the same, or it could be that the uncomfortableness or unpleasantness or suffering is what will propel you deeper, that will bring a new understanding, a new direct experience that wouldn't have been possible had it not been for the challenge in your life. So that's one thing to be careful of, that we don't slip into a rule, or if you hear a pointing about suffering, can help with deepening, then it's not a rule that you have to go through suffering to deepen. It's not a rule that you can't do things for self-care for the body and the mind, that you may just fall into the dream of having an easy life, that you need lots of challenges. It's neither here or there. There's nothing to hold on to here. It's just these things seem to inform in the moment. You'll know what's needed. There's nothing to remember or follow in this way. So I just wanted to share those insights into what is happening for me in this moment. And we shall continue with a new earth, and the last chapter, last passage we talked about is the parental role. Whether it's a role or a function, parenthood, I think it was called. That seemed to stick with me there within the last few days. I was thinking of my own life situation in this way. Maybe it did for you as well. So the title of this passage is called Conscious Suffering. If you have young children, give them help, guidance, and protection to the best of your ability. But even more important, give them space to be. They come into this world through you, but they are not yours. The belief, I know what's best for you, may be true when they are very young, but the older they get, the less true it becomes. The more expectations you have of how their life should unfold, the more you are in your mind instead of being present for them. Eventually, they will make mistakes, and they will experience some form of suffering, or as all humans do. In fact, they may be mistakes only from your perspective. What to you is a mistake may be exactly what your children need to do or experience. Give them as much help and guidance as you can, but realize that you may also at times have to allow them to make mistakes, especially as they begin to reach adulthood. At times, you may also have to allow them to suffer. Suffering may come to them out of the blue, or it may come as the consequence of their own mistakes. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could spare them from all suffering? No, it wouldn't. They would not evolve as human beings and would remain shallow, identified with the external form of things. Suffering drives you deeper. The paradox is that suffering is caused by identification with form and erodes identification with form. A lot of it is caused by the ego, although eventually suffering destroys the ego, but not until you suffer consciously. Humanity is destined to go beyond suffering, but not in the way the ego thinks. One of the ego's many erroneous assumptions, one of its many deluded thoughts, is, I should not have to suffer. Sometimes the thought gets transferred to someone close to you. My child should not have to suffer. That thought itself lies at the root of suffering. Suffering has a noble purpose, the evolution of consciousness and the burning up of the ego. The man on the cross is an archetypal image. He is every man and every woman. As long as you resist suffering, it is a slow process, because the resistance creates more ego to burn up. When you accept suffering, however, there is an acceleration of that process, which is brought about by the fact that you suffer consciously. You can accept suffering for yourself, or you can accept it for someone else, such as your child or parent. In the midst of conscious suffering, there is already the transmutation. The fire of suffering becomes the light of consciousness. The ego says, I shouldn't have to suffer. And that thought makes you suffer so much more. It is a distortion of the truth, which is always paradoxical. The truth is that you need to say yes to suffering before you can transcend it. So I'm going to go on and read the next passage as well, which is titled Conscious parenting. Many children harbour hidden anger and resentment toward their parents, and often the cause is inauthenticity in the relationship. The child has a deep longing for the parent to be there as a human being, not as a role, no matter how conscientiously that role is being played. You may be doing all the right things and the best you can for your child, but even doing the best you can is not enough. In fact, doing is never enough if you neglect being. The ego knows nothing of being, but believes you will eventually be saved by doing. If you are in the grip of the ego, you believe that by doing more and more, you will eventually accumulate enough doings to make yourself feel complete at some point in the future. You won't. You will only lose yourself in the doing. The entire civilization is losing itself in doing that is not rooted in being, and thus becomes futile. How do you bring being into the life of a busy family, into the relationship with your child? The key is to give your child attention. There are two kinds of attention. One we might call form-based attention. The other is formless attention. Form-based attention is always connected in some way with doing or evaluating. Have you done your homework? Eat your dinner. Tidy up your room. Brush your teeth. Do this. Stop doing that. Hurry up. Get ready. What's the next thing we have to do? This question pretty much summarizes what family life is like in many homes. Form-based attention is of course necessary and has its place, but if that's all there is in the relationship with your child, then the most vital dimension is missing, and being becomes completely obscured by doing, by the cares of the world, as Jesus puts it. Formless attention is inseparable from the dimension of being. How does it work? As you look at, listen to, touch, or help your child with this or that, you are alert, still, completely present, not wanting anything other than that moment as it is. In this way, you make room for being. In that moment, if you are present, you are not a father or mother. You are the alertness, the stillness, the presence that is listening, looking, touching, even speaking. You are the being behind the doing. So that brings us to the end of this passage here. And just to briefly touch upon the last point that Eckhart was making, the formless attention. In this passage it is directed towards parents with their children. Well, of course, this is applicable to any situation there, any relationship where you can bring that formless attention, where you are not speaking from a role or a position, either as a son or daughter, mother, father, brother, sister. You simply are the alertness, the stillness, the presence that is listening, looking, touching, even speaking. It says here, you are the being behind the doing. So perhaps as this episode comes to a close, we can look at our life situations and the relationships, the interactions, and perhaps you can allow the beingness to filter into these areas of your life. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. I wish you well in this moment, and we will speak again very soon. Take care.